example of some of the new work. This is watercolor. This is straight watercolor. In other words, I do a lot of studies, do a lot of drawings, and then I just come in and do watercolor on, you know, the arches, 300, you know, and I'm really excited about this because I'm really excited about the palette. You'll see that this is a lot looser than my stuff used to be, and I love the idea of doing like stainless steel and stuff with just blotches. You can see that. I thought we'd just kind of go through some stuff real quickly. So
that's a good idea. Yeah.
The stuff that we talked about.
Yeah.
So here's an example of watercolor. I'm just going to speed through them. This is an example of my workspace. So I don't really use these big palettes anymore. I use the little round ones, but and I write all my notes in marker on those round ones, so that enables me to save the palette for, let's say, snow cone bottles or vendor's shirt, or, you know, Dedicate dress, or, you know, things like that. So, but I'm very, very enamored of watercolor. I started working with EB about 2 years ago, and it was a while before we actually got to watercolor. But this was I think this was my very first attempt at watercolor. I'm almost positive. That's probably why I took this picture. Here we go. This is an example of the book, the Las Carpas stuff that we're working on. That's for another publisher. This is watercolor, very saturated over pencil. So what I did was I drew the pencil, and then I took the actual 300-pound press arches, fit it through the printer like a 13 by 19, and as it came out, when it came out, I mounted it, and then I painted using those, you know, using the light print, so that I wouldn't have to redraw it. But now I pretty much redraw everything. I think it's a lot easier than playing these games with trying to, and you know, it's looser too. I really like.
Now, when you say
one piece.
When you say redraw, Carolyn, are you talking about with a light box or freehand?
Freehand usually. Or,
okay.
You know, or with I just got a brand new, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there's this new brand new light box. It's really thin, and you can see through like really heavy paper enough to get proportions. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So because there's no point. I mean, I started in oil, and I did those huge grids. You know, those were just. It's just really time-consuming and draining. If you can just get the basic proportions down, and then you can just really have fun with each section as you go, it's a lot better. So I mean, I absolutely encourage people to use a light box if they have one to transfer their image. You know?
Very good. Yeah, sure. It's great.
Sure.
Now, have you got some of your crushed graphite in this initial group of pictures you're going to show us?
Oh, I'm just showing you some color. Some color work.
Okay.
And I love the idea of doing things that are very light and defining them by the background. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, I like this, like ice and stuff around bottles, grays, things like that. I put this in here to give an example of what the drawing looks like, because this was back to when I was still doing the drawings. Then I would transfer them, you know, print them out, and then paint using those the drawing underneath. I don't do that anymore because I think it does muddy it a little too much. Although here it kind of worked well because there was so much, you know, that the idea of the vintage look was kind of cool. But that's how similar my paintings are to the drawings. And we were talking earlier. I put together a folder for you. We were talking earlier about the idea that well, you wanted me to show some real watercolors here, and I told you that almost every time I put a watercolor on Facebook or something like that, it sells like almost immediately. And you said, tell people that. And I said, why? And you said, because they want to know that kind of stuff. And I said, okay. But here's the thing. I really noticed going through these tubs today that, and we spoke about this earlier, only like 3% of the work is actually in color. I mean, almost all of the work is drawings. And so we'll get to this folder that I just prepared for you. Well, first of all, let me show you some black and whites. Okay, so here we go. This is this particular piece, EB and I talked a lot about how I was going to do this particular book. This is the railroad tracks, the ghosts at the railroad tracks in San Antonio, and I really wanted to do it in black and white, and he said, you know what you need to do is get powdered graphite, and you just sprinkle it on, you know, vellum, and then be working with that, you know, use powdered graphite. And so,
I'm sorry, the white spaces are erasures?
Yeah, that was what I was going to get to, because I take this picture to all the kids, you know, school visits, and I was really, I think I was listening to some Godzilla movies in the background, and, you know, like Valley of the Guanji, and so I was trying to get into that space, and we'll see in a little bit the extent I went to get this kind of stuff.
Wow.
But, I mean, to get, you know, just to immerse myself in this world. But basically, I started realizing that the spirit coming out of each kid would be better drawn in eraser. So I prepared 3 different types of erasers, and I started really drawing everything in eraser. So if you'll notice, it's almost all pulled off.
Wow.
You know? So that was really cool. And I tried to do the entire book that way, but it got really messy really quickly. But I really love this. And here's the thing about this. We had talked earlier about the fact, I told you, I said, if somebody is not inventing their own equipment to get the drawing that they need, or to get the rendering they need for print, I don't think that they're working hard enough. And you and I think we disagreed about that. Is that correct, Mark?
No, I was listening. I was intrigued. I was wondering, I wonder what kind of art instrument I can invent, and I was hard pressed to think of anything. But
well, you know, the idea is that you have a vision in your head, and you don't just use what, you know, is sold. You know, you do whatever you need to do to get that mark. And you know, it's always about the mark.